Okay, when we're naming a polygon, number 20 says, to name a polygon, first list the type of polygon. So in terms of type of polygon, we're talking about how do we classify it based on the number of sides alone. So triangle, quadrilateral, pentagon, etc. So we want to first list the type of polygon. Next, we want to then start at any vertex and list the vertices consecutively in a blank or blank direction. So think about it. If you're going around a figure, there's two directions you could go. You could go clockwise, or you could go counterclockwise. Now the directions for 21 through 24 say to name each polygon at least 2 ways. On 21, we're going to name it 4 ways, just to make the point that there are many acceptable ways we could name this polygon. So the first thing we're going to do is start out by numbering the sides so we can determine the type of polygon. We established that there are 5 sides in this polygon, so that means it is a pentagon. Okay, now we pick any vertex to start. So if I start at A, I can go clockwise or I can go counterclockwise. So if I go clockwise, I go A to B to C to D to E, and then we get back to A. You have to go around it. You cannot jump around. You have to go around in order. Now I'm allowed to go counterclockwise, so I could start at E and say E, D, C, B, A. So we would read this as pentagon, E, D, C, B, A. I'm allowed to start at any vertex I want. So let's say I started at vertex C, and I want to go clockwise. I could do C, D, E, A, B. I cannot scramble the order. So if I do C, D, I cannot go A, then E. That's not allowed. I have to go around in order. That I get to it. So it's not necessarily alphabetical order. In this case, I do have these letters in alphabetical order, but the point is that you're going in order around the figure. The letters may or may not be in alphabetical order. All right, let's pick any vertex we want. Let's say we pick D. We're going to go counterclockwise this time. C, B, A, E. Okay, the next polygon, we need to number the sides. We have 7 sides, which tells me that I have 2 acceptable names for this figure. I'm allowed to call it a heptagon or a septagon. Both are correct. I'm allowed to start at any vertex that I would like. So let's say I start at vertex I. If I want to go counterclockwise, I would do I, H, G, F, L, K, J. And then that brings me back to I. Now let's say I started with vertex K. I could do K. I could go clockwise. L, F, G, H, I, J. Both of those are acceptable names. There are plenty of other acceptable names for this figure. Problem 23's figure has 9 sides, which tells me it is a nonagon. Once again, pick any letter to start with. We start with Q. We could go clockwise, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y. Brings us back to Q. We start at any vertex we want. Let's say we start at V. Let's go counterclockwise this time. U, T, S, R, Q, Y, X, W. Okay, and lastly, we have a 4-sided figure, which is clearly a quadrilateral. So we could name this quadrilateral O, P, M, N, going in a clockwise motion. Now, I do want you to go up to the top. We need to add an extra note at the top. For a triangle and for a quadrilateral, there's going to be a shortcut that we're allowed to use. So for a triangle, instead of writing the word triangle, you are allowed to, so it says you can write the word triangle, but you may write the triangle symbol. For a quadrilateral, you may write a quadrilateral symbol. Now, you're not trying to identify the specific type of quadrilateral in the symbol. It's just a rectangle, just a generic quadrilateral for the symbol. Now, all other polygons require the word of the name. So like we wrote heptagon or septagon, pentagon, nonagon, you must write the word for all the others. You are allowed to write the word for triangle and quadrilateral, but it is not a requirement unless the problem specifically specifies. Okay, so in this one I'm just going to put the quadrilateral symbol. And let's say I start with O. So I could start with O and name it counterclockwise. So O-N-M-P. And that's going to give me another acceptable name for this quadrilateral. Okay, for problem 25, it asks us to name the polygon, then identify its vertices, sides, and angles. So let's take a look. We can clearly see that we have a 3-sided figure here, which we know a 3-sided figure is a triangle. We were just told that we are allowed to abbreviate by drawing a triangle symbol. So let's say we start with vertex B. If we go in a clockwise motion, it would be triangle BHS. Okay, if we start with vertex H, in a clockwise motion, triangle HSB. We start with vertex S, in a clockwise direction, triangle SBH. We had 3 acceptable names in a clockwise direction. We're going to have 3 acceptable names in a counterclockwise direction. So let's say we started with vertex B again, in a counterclockwise direction, triangle BSH. If we start with vertex H again, counterclockwise, it's triangle HBH. BS. And lastly, if we start with vertex S in a counterclockwise rotation, it's triangle SHB. So let's go ahead and note that we realize that there are 6 names, 3 clockwise and 3 counterclockwise. We also know that we're allowed to write this out with the word. So I'm going to put a little delineation here to show you that there's only 6 unique names, but we could write it out with the word. So we could say triangle BHS, triangle BSH, triangle HSB, triangle HBS, triangle SBH, triangle SHB. So there are 12 appropriate ways to write it, but there's only 6 unique names. It's just the difference between writing the symbol or writing the word. And again, you can only write the symbol for a triangle or a quadrilateral. Okay, we know that this is a triangle. So we know that we're going to have 3 vertices. We know a vertex is a point, so we name it as a point. So point B, point H, and point S. We know that sides connect consecutive vertices. We know it's a triangle, so we know that we have 3 sides. We know that there's 2 appropriate ways to name each side. So let's start out. We could have side BH. It is equally acceptable to name that side HB. BH is the same as side HB. Okay, we have side HS. H to S. It's equally acceptable to name it side SH. And lastly, we have side SB. It is equally acceptable to name that side BS. Okay, for our angles, we also know that we have 3 angles. Since there are no angles that share a vertex, we are allowed to use a single letter to name each angle. So we could say angle B, angle H, and angle S. We know that it's also appropriate to use the 3-letter naming system. If B is the vertex of our angle, B has to be the middle letter. So we could name this angle SBH or angle HBS. Remember, the vertex has to be the middle letter when you use 3 letters to name the angle. So if H is our vertex, we could name this angle angle BHS. Or we could name this angle angle SHB. And lastly, if S is our vertex, we could name this angle angle HSB. Or angle BSH. So there's only 3 unique angles, but there's 3 ways to write each one acceptably. There's only 3 unique sides, but there's 2 ways to write each of those acceptably. There's 3 vertices, single way to write that. There's 6 possible ways to name it, but because we could use the symbol or the word, there's 12 options here, all of which give an appropriate name for this figure.